Changes at the Capitol as we move closer to election season. We know the top Republicans on the ballot, but it's not clear which Democrats will take on the biggest statewide races.
My only guiding principle, my North Star, is what can I do now for my country at its moment of truth.
We go in depth with Beto O'Rourke, what he's saying about how his plans mesh with other top Democrats aiming to run in 2026. Governor Abbott calls lawmakers back for a special session. He's looking for regulations on THC in Texas, but the lieutenant governor still wants a full ban.
I'm not going to legalize marijuana in Texas. And if people want to vote me out of office for that, so be it. Not going to do it.
We look at the conflict to come and what hemp advocates are pushing for when lawmakers return to the Capitol. The Comptroller is about to become the Chancellor. We speak one-on-one with Glenn Hegar, how his vision for Texas A&M could bring big changes to the state.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. Texas lawmakers have more work to do with a special session just weeks away. But campaign season is also looming, and we're already seeing some big changes coming at the Capitol. Among them, East Texas Senator Robert Nichols announced he will not run for re-election. The Republican has served in the Senate since 2007. Nichols is known for occasionally breaking with fellow Republicans on votes, a rarity in the Senate. For example, he was one of only 2 Republicans who voted to convict Attorney General Ken Paxton during his impeachment trial. Nichols will serve the remainder of his term, which ends in January. Immediately after Nichols announced his retirement, State Representative Trent Ashby announced he would run for the seat. The Lufkin Republican was first elected to the House in 2012. Last week, we told you about another departure from the Texas Senate. Tarrant County Republican Kelly Hancock resigned from his seat. The move sets the stage for Hancock to serve as interim state controller. But another state senator may have had the biggest campaign announcement of the week. Houston Republican Joan Huffman announced she will run for Texas Attorney General. Huffman is a former state prosecutor who also served as a district court judge. This session, she was the Senate Finance Chair and also served on the Senate Criminal Justice Committee. Huffman will face fellow State Senator Mays Middleton in next year's Republican primary. Middleton announced his campaign back in April. The Galveston Republican pledged to fund his campaign with $10 million of his own money. A third Republican running in the AG primary is Aaron Reitz, who recently left a role serving in the U.S. Justice Department. Current Attorney General Ken Paxton is not running for re-election. Instead, he's campaigning for the U.S. Senate seat currently held by John Cornyn. New polling suggests that neither candidate is popular with voters. The Texas Politics Project at UT polled 1,200 registered voters between June 6th and June 16th. 29% of voters had a favorable opinion of Paxton, while 43% in the poll view him unfavorably. Cornyn's numbers were lower, with just 23% saying they had a favorable opinion of the senator. 46% gave Cornyn an unfavorable number. Poll numbers like that are raising hopes for Texas Democrats, but it's not clear who will be on the ballot for next year's primary. One Texan a lot of folks are watching is former Congressman Beto O'Rourke. He spoke one-on-one with politics reporter Adam Schwager about town hall events he's holding around the state and if that could lead to a statewide campaign.
You've been doing town halls across the state, and let's just get the elephant out of the room here. Town hall is usually something that someone does when they're looking to run for office. Are you looking at another statewide office in 2026?
I'm trying to be as helpful and as useful as I can to the people of Texas right now. Folks are going through a lot. You've got proposed Medicaid cuts that are going to hit people who are already living in the least insured state in the country. So it's harder to see a doctor or to get medication or to be healthy and well enough to do your job or finish school in Texas than it is anywhere else. We're home to tens of thousands of veterans. There are 83,000 positions slated to be cut at the VA. And then Texans understandably are concerned about the attacks on the Constitution, on the rule of law, on the right to vote, and our democracy. So the moment calls for us to be out there now, not waiting to run for office or to be a candidate or run a campaign or for 2026, but right now. And that's why we're holding these town halls all over the state, everywhere. In San Antonio tonight, Laredo tomorrow, Tyler and Beaumont after that. If it makes sense to be a candidate, to continue that work in that way, I will. If not, then I won't. My only guiding principle, my North Star, is what can I do now for my country at its moment of truth? And so doing these town halls, running Powered by People, which is registering tens of thousands of new voters and helping them get to the ballot box. That's the work that makes sense. If that includes being a candidate at some point, well, I'm open to that.
So you mentioned some of those cities that you're hosting these town halls, and some of them in very red areas of the state. What appeals you to going to those areas and trying to reach out to those voters?
I think part of the problem with our country right now, so polarized and so divided, is that we've kind of stayed in our own corners. Democrats will be in Austin or San Antonio or Dallas or Houston, but when we don't go to Amarillo or Wichita Falls or Humboldt, Texas, we're basically telling voters there that they do not matter to us. And so I make a point of going to those places that have been written off by Democrats and taken for granted by Republicans and left effectively unrepresented to listen and hear people. When we were in Amarillo, for example, front row of our town hall are a couple of guys wearing Make America Great Again hats. I wonder, are you here to protest? Are you going to disrupt this event? They were there to listen and to hear what their fellow Texans and Americans were saying right now. And often throughout the course of that town hall, I saw them nodding their heads because folks are hurt right now. These tariffs are creating incredible uncertainty for growers and ranchers and farmers in North Texas. The inability for people to come to this country legally, safely, and in an orderly manner to work jobs that employers and farmers and ranchers are unable to fill, that's hurting folks regardless of whether they're Republican or Democrat, whether they live in a big city or a rural county. So showing up for everyone, fighting for everybody, that is what we should do right now. And I also think it is the path to power for Democrats if we're serious about winning.
I know that 2026 issue, you're waiting to see how it plays out. There was a Dallas Morning News report came out yesterday that said you've been talking with State Representative Tallarico, Representative Castro, former Representative Allred about the path forward for 2026. What were those conversations like?
It's a recognition that in Colin Allred and Joaquin Castro, James Tallarico, Jasmine Crockett, Ron Nirenberg, we have an embarrassment of talent in this state. We don't lack for Democrats who can run powerful, strong, statewide races. My concern is making sure that everyone is in the right position. If you have everybody clustered in a Senate primary, for example, well then who's going to run for governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general? Furthermore, we need strong candidates running for every congressional, every state house position across the state. Ronnie Jackson, whose congressional district includes Wichita Falls, Amarillo, and Denton, did not have a Democratic contender in 2024. That means that when Colin Allred was running for Senate, there was no one in those communities sending votes up the ballot to help him against Ted Cruz. So we need Democrats, strong Democrats, at every position on the ballot, statewide and then down ballot. So I'm hopeful that that can be resolved and that those people that I just mentioned and many more will all find that right place on the ballot, and that we will be able to present a united front to the people of Texas.
We have more from our interview with O'Rourke online now, including his thoughts on the pressure to draw new Republican-friendly congressional districts in the state and what he thinks the media gets wrong about Texas. You can see the full interview linked in this week's State of Texas story on our website. Tension between the governor and lieutenant governor over THC.
What kind of culture do we want? Do we want everybody high? Everywhere you go, it smells like grass. It's awful. I don't want that for Texas.
Governor Abbott calls a special session looking for ways to regulate THC, but Dan Patrick does not seem ready to compromise. Plus, Texas A&M is about to get a new leader. We go one-on-one with Glenn Hegar about the challenge ahead and the critical job he's leaving behind. The hemp industry celebrated Governor Greg Abbott's veto of Senate Bill 3 last weekend, but now their focus is shifting toward next month's special session to regulate the industry. The special session comes as Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who made banning THC a priority, isn't backing down. Capitol reporter Adam Schwager talked to industry leaders about the upcoming special session.
Looks like you're going to be back here in another few weeks, right?
Less than a day after his proposed ban on THC was vetoed by Governor Greg Abbott,
Thank you all for coming.
Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick indicated a refusal to back down.
I'm not going to legalize marijuana in Texas. And if people want to vote me out of office for that, so be it. Not going to do it.
Since then, Patrick's gotten bolder. In his veto, Abbott cited a ban in Arkansas, which at the time was held up in court. After the court ruled Arkansas can enforce their ban on Tuesday, Patrick reacted by saying, "All we have to do is pass SB 3. However, Abbott reaffirmed his position to regulate rather than prohibit consumable hemp, saying that process begins next month.
I'm watching Texas very closely.
Roger Wolodarski is the founder and CEO of Puffco, a company which makes high-tech products for consuming THC-infused concentrates.
If Texas is able to flip and offer safe access to users, that is a great omen for the future of cannabis in the federal world as well.
At first glance, Wolodarski agrees with many of Abbott's proposed reforms, finding a balance between safety and freedom.
Lab testing, labeling, age-restricted access, the things that we're doing in all of the other states should be rolled out in Texas to make sure it's not getting in the hands of kids and the people who are using it are able to use safe product.
But he does not want to see the state shut down the ability to smoke THC products, a regulation currently found in the state's medical marijuana program.
You can't just eat an edible and then go on with your day. You're going to be affected by it for hours. But if you do inhale something, especially cannabis concentrates, you can get what you need from it, and it goes away within 45 minutes to an hour.
Lawmakers will come back to Austin on July 21st to discuss regulating THC. For State of Texas, I'm Adam Schwager.
The standoff between the governor and lieutenant governor has some Democrats at the Capitol proceeding into this special session with caution.
Far from being in the spirit of compromise, the lieutenant governor is determined to win here. So we're trying to figure out what is the best strategy to make sure we don't pass a bill, again, that criminalizes the possession of sleep gummies that you get at the pharmacy. At this point, Texans are accustomed to having access to this medication. So we need to tread very carefully here.
A news release from State Senator Sarah Eckhart highlights the position of many Texas Democrats. She wrote, "Here's something you won't hear me say often. Governor Abbott is right. Vetoing SB 3 was the right call. While my staffers aren't eager to cut their summer vacation short, I'm actually looking forward to having the chance to take another pass on THC." Glenn Hegar has been the state's controller for more than 10 years. Now he's taking on a new challenge. We speak with him as he prepares to lead the Texas A&M system. Plus, funding for crime victims held up by flaws in the system. Find out how new funding in the state budget could bring change and help victims of violent crime. Glenn Hegar has been the state's controller for more than 10 years. Now he's leaving that job behind for a new challenge. Next week, Hegar will become chancellor of the Texas A&M University System. And he's here now with us to talk about that task. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you today.
So the leadership change at A&M has been months in the making. What have you been doing to prepare for that transition?
Yeah, great question. Current Chancellor John Sharp and his team have been fantastic. I've been in College Station usually a couple days every week. I've probably been spending more time on that job than I have my current role. And so essentially just visiting with staff, traveling our campuses across the state of Texas, trying to learn and ramp up engaging in this transition to make sure I have my team in place and making sure that it's just another day at the office come July 1 when we make the transition.
What do you see as some of the key challenges and opportunities with the Texas A&M system? What are your goals?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one of the biggest things that we have to kind of keep first and foremost, no matter what, is that our job is the students that attend Texas A&M University System across our 12 campuses across the state of Texas, our 8 state agencies that serve the people of the state of Texas every single day in some capacity throughout 250. All of our counties we have a presence in across the state of Texas. So first and foremost are our students, making sure that we equip them with the tools necessary to be a significant contributor to the Texas economy, to create an economic opportunity for themselves, for their families, for the communities, and for the state of Texas.
Affordability is obviously a big challenge everywhere. Many Texans seeking higher education are dealing with it. It's driving some people to forego college altogether. What would you like to see done at A&M to make college more affordable there?
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that question because, again, those students are the first and foremost, our 170,000 students across this system and all the universities. And so making sure that, one, we maintain those costs and try to make ability for them to have more affordability. As we know, higher education has become less affordable, especially with all the cost drivers of inflation. Those have made it significantly harder. And so every single way that we can make affordability better for our students is a way that we can help them make sure they don't have debt, they have an opportunity in the beginning when they get a job, and making sure just that they enter college, they graduate college, have the affordability, and also being able to obtain a job when they get out of school is all at the forefront.
I want to switch gears now to the job that you are leaving. You just certified the state budget. There seems to be a lot of uncertainty with the economy right now, like things like war and tariffs. As you leave, any concern about the state's economic outlook?
The first and foremost to realize is the state's foundation is a very strong foundation in the state of Texas. The direction of the Texas economy is strong. We have people that continue to move here every day. We have businesses that want to set up shop, businesses that want to move here. And so the trajectory is really strong, even though we don't know what's on the horizon globally today, tomorrow, and especially as we look off into the next year.
As we mentioned, you've been controller for more than 10 years now. What do you consider your important accomplishments?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is just driving a culture at the agency of customer service. Our job is the people of the state of Texas, serving them, the taxpayers of the state of Texas, making sure that that culture in that agency, when someone reaches out to us for customer assistance, for help, that we are doing everything that we can and using all modes of communication to make it easier for them. Because the less time people are spending trying to figure out how do they set up a business, how do they get their taxes filed, those are things they can be doing to make real life impacts for their employees, for their coworkers, and making sure they're growing the state economy rather than worrying about how do I do this and how do I do that. So that culture of customer service is first and foremost.
Last week, we spoke to soon-to-be acting controller Kelly Hancock. What advice do you have for him?
Yeah, Kelly has been a great member of the legislature. He's a businessman, strong belief on his family. So he's got his values in place. And I think Kelly's going to do a really good job. He's been working really hard in the last week since he was sworn in as deputy controller. And I know that he'll be ready come next week to take on the reins of this agency and continue to make sure that this agency is at the forefront in customer service, making sure that we are using cutting edge capabilities, technologies, and that he's making sure that he guides the legislature through what those uncertainties that we were just talking about that may be on the horizon. So I got absolute faith in the ability that he will in the coming year.
Well, let's settle the argument. Is it controller or comptroller?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you asked one of my deputies many years ago, he was asked that question when he went to the legislature, and he said, "Let me explain this. I used to work for comptroller Susan Combs, and I now work for controller Glenn Hegar. It's however the boss says it." So we'll see what Hancock says come next Tuesday, if he changes it from controller to comptroller, or if he stays with the correct pronunciation, which is controller of public accounts.
All right, well, controller Glenn Hegar, soon to be Texas A&M System Chancellor. Thank you so much for joining us.
Always good to be with you.
Earlier this month, I spoke with former Governor Rick Perry, who's one of the best-known Aggies in Texas politics. I asked Perry for his thoughts about the change at A&M, and he praised Hegar, but put a spotlight on outgoing Chancellor John Sharp.
John Sharp did an incredible job in his 14 years of being the chancellor. In the history of the school, goes back all the way to 1876. I will suggest to you there has been no one who has elevated Texas A&M anymore, been involved in more issues, delivered more, so to speak, whether it was the Rellis campus, the work with Futures Command, whether it's the law school up in Fort Worth, the work that John did when Governor Abbott put him in charge of Hurricane Harvey. His leadership, his vision is going to be really hard to replace.
Some quick context for Perry's praise of outgoing Chancellor John Sharp. Perry and Sharp were classmates at Texas A&M and even lived in the same dorm. They became political rivals, facing off in the 1998 race for lieutenant governor. Perry won by 2 percentage points, but their friendship endured. And in 2011, regents appointed by Perry picked Sharp to be A&M's chancellor. Improvements are on the way for a program that helps victims of violent crime. How our investigative reporting helped lead to changes to fix flaws in the system. Part of the state budget signed by Governor Abbott includes a new law sparked by 2 years of our investigations into the Texas Crime Victims Compensation Fund. That fund helps cover costs like medical bills, counseling, and lost wages to help victims of violent crime get back on their feet. Our Held Up investigation previously found the fund has used a flawed formula that skewed how fast payments to victims were actually being made. The Attorney General's office will now have to separate claims paid directly to hospitals from payments made to victims instead of averaging them together. The law will set a 90-day average goal for victims to be paid. You can catch up on our complete coverage now on our website. Just look for the Held Up link in this week's State of Texas story. Governor Abbott also signed a bill seeking to close every loophole a potential predator might use to gain access to students at Texas schools. Senate Bill 571 passed the House in a landslide. It was sparked after our investigation revealed a juvenile corrections officer was able to get a tutoring job at an Austin ISD campus while under investigation for sexual misconduct by a state agency. The bill expands the Texas Education Agency's authority to investigate volunteers and third-party contractors who work on school campuses and are accused of certain misconduct. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.